Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, The Bouncer on PlayStation 2. By the year 2001, the beat-em-up genre had ground to a halt. Once the darling of the arcades, they were overtaken by the more competitive fighting game genre, where the Street Fighters and their ilk came to dominate the scene. Even home console, where they populated like mushrooms after a spring rain, proved no safe harbor, when fatigue from overpopulation and cheap production caused players to look at other types of games. And when the U.S. arcade scene finally collapsed and arcades closed en masse, those quarter munchers ended up either in the hands of private collectors or, more often, public landfills. But that didn't stop Square, then still known as Squaresoft, from trying their hand at the beat-em-up genre. The result was 2001's The Bouncer, the subject of our talk today. And it was... yikes. The Bouncer? We need to talk. Longtime listeners to this podcast know by now that when I give a game the We Need to Talk modifier, that is usually my warning of incoming vitriol, either at a bad game I wanted to like, or at a quote-unquote classic that I think is absolute shit. The Bouncer is different in that I played through this game several times, and I am just thoroughly puzzled by it to this day. Mostly at the decisions Square made in its design, story, and player presentation. But let me start at the overplot. The Bouncer focuses on the lives of three very specific people: young and brash Sion, cocky but generally average Co, and quiet, heavy-hitting Volt. All three are employed as bouncers at a bar named Fate within fictional Edge City. For those of you who may or may not know, the term bouncer is a name for someone employed by a bar or tavern whose job is to physically throw out violent or abusive patrons, or those who have had too much to drink, and keep the peace. Bouncers have a reputation of being tough, not nice, and usually end up having to deal with police quite a lot by nature of their job. And that is exactly who our playable characters are and what they do. Now, their boss, the bar owner, has adopted a young amnesiac runaway named Dominique, who the bouncers see as a little sister character. Life is going along normally for these hired fighters when one night a group of wetsuit-wearing, infrared goggles sporting thugs smash into the bar and kidnap Dominique despite their best efforts of the bar's defenders. The three of them set out into the night to rescue the adopted little sister. Here's where we start to see some of the theoretically interesting but piss-poorly executed design ideas. As in any beat-em-up, you choose a character from a small team of martial arts experts and go out into the city to raise hell, either completely alone or with other players if they are present. The Bouncer lets you pick a character, then the computer takes control of the other two characters, so you aren't fighting alone as the game focuses on all three characters at once. This is, however, a single-player game for the main story mode. Each character sees the events of the game very differently from the others, and the game focuses only on the perspective of the character you pick for that level. So if you want a confusing, nonsensical story, pick a different character for each level. To get the full plot, you need to complete the Bouncer no less than 3 times, once for each of the playable characters to see their side of events. Also, Square is well known as an RPG or role-playing game maker. The Bouncer taps into this pedigree by having the characters gain experience for each enemy they defeat. You can only expend this experience on the character you played in that level, and they are the only one who gains said experience. If the AI-controlled characters knock an enemy out, then you lose out on the experience. Experience can only be spent on new moves and health increases, and the cost of those skills becomes prohibitive after a while compared to the rewards gained. So it is very easily, on your first run-through of the game, to become completely ineffective by the mid-game if you've been switching characters and taking low-level skills. This could have been a neat mechanic, and games in the intervening years have executed this much more effectively, but Square made it very clear they didn't know what they were doing here. Having to lean heavily on one character to do the fighting repeatedly to build the team into something formidable is simply not fun. Perhaps the greatest sin of this game commits is its cutscenes. Holy shit, the cutscenes. There are almost 3 times as many of them as actual periods of gameplay. Fights take place in small arenas, not for more than a few minutes at a time. They can be quickly followed by an up to 10 to 20 minute cutscene where the story takes a massive exposition dump on the player's head. And yes, you can skip the cutscenes, but you will find yourself either at sudden chapter ends, or teleported to completely different domains, or dropped onto a boss fight with no idea what happened or how you got there. Square loves its long cutscenes, and in an RPG is where they needed to stay. And talk about the direct-to-video plot this movie game has, because that's what it is. A movie with a few minutes of gameplay, so spoilers ahead. Edge City is run by the Mikado Corporation, and the corporation is run by the dynastic Mikado family. The current CEO, Duragon, has built a doomsday satellite and intends to wipe out the city and humanity if possible, due to being a sad, angry man-child. He sends the goons to kidnap Dominique because that is his actual little sister. Sion is also a sad, angry man-child, and that is his whole character arc as he seeks to get Dominique back. Ko is actually a government operative from another country and is trying to stop Duragon, and was assigned to be a bouncer at the bar where Dominique was staying. And Volt used to work for Mikado Security, got disillusioned, and was nearly killed by his employer, and was taken in by the bar. But surprise twist, Dominique isn't human. She is actually an android created by Duragon Mikado, who is in his mid-20s, by the way, in the image of his dead 13-year-old sister. And she is also the key to the Doomsday Satellite. So the game starts in a bar in a slightly futuristic city and ends fighting in space at the core of a satellite, which you need to escape once Duragon dies and sets off the self-destruct button. The self-destruct button on the Doomsday Satellite that is permanently tied to the teenage android's girl. That is the key to the whole thing. What the fuck? What the hell was all that? And you want me to replay this game 2 more times to get the full story? Well, I did, so more the fool me, I suppose. The game ends with the bouncers deciding to just live happily ever after with the robot girl once they return to Earth. The bouncer plays out as if famed schlock director Roger Corman wrote the script for 3 Men and a Baby. The game is mostly sizzle but very little steak. Beautiful for the PlayStation 2 as far as graphics, poorly implemented RPG mechanics, blink and you miss it brawls, gibberish plot, and the cutscenes that just go on and on. The bouncer could have been helped to revitalize the beat-em-up genre at the time when it was sorely needed. With the backing of an industry powerhouse, but instead, it got KO'd in the first round. I'm not even mad about it, the bouncer. Just disappointed. Very, very disappointed. Thank you for listening.